but more than this, I wish you luck.
It's funny how when certain people do unexpected things out of the blue, it's still so cliche and expected. Yes, of course, I'm talking about Meghan Markle's launch of, what's it called? American Riviera Orchard, aka the TIG 2.0, which she coincidentally launched during the Diana Awards. Only I used the word launch loosely because she's got nothing to launch. We basically get nothing other than confirmation that her house is so large, even she could get lost in it wearing a ball gown. Now, I'm not here to talk about, oh, how dare she, she's merging her titles, she's doing this, she's going against, the Sandringham Summit. I think we've all talked about that enough at this point. Let's not forget, this is not the first time she blatantly merged her royal title. If you remember the bench, it was right there on the front cover by Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. But in the midst of all this chaos and uproar surrounding this non-launch, really, because there's nothing to launch, no products and no website, a question occurred to me that I wanted to pose to you as well. Will this latest venture succeed? It's a valid question to ask given her track record of masterful flops, even when she is literally set up for success. I'm talking Spotify set up a studio in her mansion for her to run her podcast out of, and she still failed. And isn't it fascinating how almost every single thing that Meghan Markle has accomplished, Meghan, the self-made woman who don't need no man, was achieved by riding on the coattails of others, specifically men? Because when you think about every single thing that she loves to boast about and pat herself on the back about, like the dishwashing liquid commercial.
Women are fighting greasy pots and pans.
And I said, wait a minute, how could somebody say that? I think I'll write a letter.
Or her student internship in Argentina.
Get a job working in politics? I used to work for the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires, and it was another life.
Her story about paying her way through university by working and through scholarships.
It was through scholarships, financial aid programs, and work study, where my earnings from a job on campus went directly towards my tuition, that I was able to attend university.
Those were all bald-faced lies. Make no mistake, folks, when it comes to Meghan Markle, behind every so-called success of hers is a man. Her father set up the whole dishwashing liquid story for her. He opened doors to Hollywood. Her uncle got her that internship in Argentina, which she flopped. She failed the entrance exam. And that's why she went back to Hollywood, not because
I've been working for the U.S. Embassy in Argentina. When a friend of mine gave a student film that I had done to a manager, and he said, you're going to make money and I want to take 10%. I think you should stay in L.A. And I did.
And then when she got to Hollywood, she couldn't even really do that by herself and had to rely again on her father's connections and her ex-husband, Trevor Engelson.
Meghan! Hey! Wow, you look great.
Do not speak.
So considering this dismal track record of hers, confirmed by the very messy and appalling launch of this American symphony of grifters, I couldn't help but wonder, how on earth was the TIG even remotely as successful as it was, given her poor work ethic and general ineptness? After all, this is a woman who confessed in her tax documents to, at best case scenario, working 1 hour a week on her foundation, which was presumably set up for philanthropic reasons, right? And, that's right down Meghan's humanitarian alley, right? Maybe we're being quick to judge, and this American plagiarism society will be a resounding success. But here's the million-dollar question. Was Meghan Markle truly behind the success of the TIG? To be quite honest, I had never heard of the TIG before, but I will give her the benefit of the doubt in the sense that I was far younger than her demographic, I believe, in its heyday. And I've never been into celebrity lifestyle, stuff. So let me know in the comments below if it was actually as successful as she likes to make it. However, I do have one metric to go by, assuming Tom Bauer did his research, because while he's a really good researcher, there were a few flaws in his book Revenge. He stated that by March of 2015, the TIG had already amassed close to 1 million followers on Instagram and close to 250,000 on Twitter. Now, for a D-lister who was barely known, that's pretty impressive, especially in under a year since its launch in May of 2014. But it's this singular success that makes it so interesting to me, only because it doesn't slot in neatly with Meghan's track record. For all intents and purposes, though, it was Meghan Markle's baby. She was the face of it, and if we go by what she said in interviews, which, we know her credibility is shot, but according to her, she was the driving force behind it. She designed the website, she wrote the content, she researched the content, and started networking, making cold calls, making it happen. But we all know that Meghan Markle isn't known for her work ethic. It's not like she was a hardworking woman throughout her life and only became lazy when she met Harry. If you've read Revenge, you'd know she had many opportunities to take up acting classes, for instance, and improve her craft, but she refused to. Meghan is the quintessential entitled person who believes that they deserve to be at the top without doing any of the hard work. So her laziness is inextricably connected with her narcissism. She doesn't have any discernible talents. The Bench and her Spotify flopcast prove that. Surely her success can't exist in a TIG vacuum. So was it pure dumb luck, perhaps? An opportune time in social media? Instagram was still relatively in its infancy at the time, not many people to compete with. Or was it another case of riding on somebody else's coattails? People say that with the TIG and also with this latest American hysterical orchestra thing, that she's copying Gwyneth Paltrow with Goop and Martha Stewart and, all these celebrity lifestyle gurus. But I'd also like to add a hefty dose of Highgrove Royal Orchard Summer Honey, or jam, because apparently that's what she intends on selling. Seems to me like somebody's got a bit of a case of copycat. And while the saying, "there's no such thing as an original idea," comes to mind, and yes, it is a viable defense, I submit that there is a big difference between drawing inspiration from something or someone else and crediting said inspiration where necessary versus blatant, lazy copying. And the TIG, according to my research, was just another copycat project designed and built by the very person who inspired it. Enter Jake Rosenberg, a Canadian-born, New York-based photographer, co-founder, and creative director of a website called The Coveteur, and also designer of the TIG. Now, Jake's name was mentioned only once in passing by Tom Bauer in Revenge, and he was credited as the designer of the TIG. But when I read the book a couple of years ago and I came across Jake's name, for some reason, it rang a bell. So I thought, I must have come across this name before. Sure enough, Meghan in 2016, after she met Harry and she was flaunting that, bracelet, specifically mentioned Jake's name in relation to the TIG. Have a listen.
Do you guys know the website The Coveteur? So I'm really good friends with Jake Rosenberg, who's the creative director on it, and he's like, use our graphic designer from Coveteur, let them do the design aesthetic of the TIG.
Now, we've all been covering Meghan Markle for a while now, and we know that generally, more times than not, probably 99.9999999% of the time, whatever she says, flip it around, and that's usually the truth. Because here we're hearing her say, "Oh, Jake begged me."
He's like, I beg you, please do not go down this path.
He was offering everything to her voluntarily. Meghan has a nasty habit of pretending that everyone in the world is clamoring to get a piece of her. She's done it with the UN, claiming they've reached out to her numerous times.
When UN Women reached out to me. It's a website, yes. And it's actually where UN Women reached out to me. 4 days later, I got an email. I had received an email the very next day. 4 days later, I got an email. 4 days later, I got an email. I had received an email the very next day from one of the highest executives for UN Women saying, "We love what you're using your platform to do. Would you potentially want to start working with us?"
She's done it with Dove.
You know, when Dove reached out to me,
She's done it with practically every organization or person that she's been associated with. When the truth is, she was doing some serious begging behind the scenes to her friends who were very well connected, such as Misan Harriman, yes, the photographer who was very recently embroiled in the latest Sussex Photoshop gate that backfired in their faces. He got her in with One Young World. They never reached out to her like she loves to tell us. And then there was Irish hotelier John Fitzpatrick, who was very well connected with the Clintons and the Obamas and used those connections to get Meghan in, very briefly because she ruined it, with the UN. So, sensing that there's a little more than meets the eye, as is usually the case with Meghan, I decided to do some digging. So Jake, who is around 7 years Meghan's junior, built a name for himself as a photographer and designer pretty early on in life. By 2011, when he was only 23, he founded the website Meghan mentioned. By the age of 27, in 2015, he'd already landed a photo shoot with none other than Oprah Winfrey, who Meghan wouldn't even have dreamt of being in the same room as back in 2015. And by 2017, he made the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for his achievements. Which, by the way, if you know anything about the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, it's actually nothing impressive because they kind of have this curse, and I'm not accusing Jake of being one of those people, mind you, but they have this curse of featuring con artists. I don't know what it is, they keep falling for it. But I digress. So while young Jake was going places, at the same time, Meghan Markle was still relatively very small fish. And so naturally, she clung to him like a leech. Or I should say, like a parasite, you know, because she brought up that metaphor in the Netflix mockumentary. Whatever it is, it seems to me that Meghan had Jake eating right out of her hands, which really starts to connect the dots in helping to make sense out of the Tig's, out of the blue, in a vacuum success. Turning our attention briefly to Jake's website, which I remind you, was founded 3 entire years before the Tig, but you can see that there are more than a few similarities. And I don't necessarily mean the design or the layout. Jake did design the Tig, so any similarities could be forgiven. But I'm talking about the actual content. The tagline for the Couveteur is "Inside closets, fashion, beauty, health, and travel." Meanwhile, 3 years later, Meghan described the Tig as a hub for the discerning palate, those with a hunger for food, travel, fashion, and beauty. You see the number of similarities in these taglines and descriptors of what the website's about? It's basically the exact same thing. So when Meghan says she browsed Instagram for inspiration for her Tig posts,
how do you stay inspired? You know, Instagram?
I think what she really meant was, I just do whatever the Couveteur does. Easy. And this is just what I could find out from the little bit of digging that I did, because Jake Rosenberg isn't exactly a very high-profile personality. He's very successful in his own right, but he's not in the mainstream. But who knows what other doors Jake or other people must have opened for her to facilitate everything she did on the Tig, which on face value looked like she did it all. So when you add Jake to the equation, suddenly, at least in my mind, the Tig's success, minor as it was in the grand scheme of things, starts to make sense. Namely, it looks like that too was a result of riding on the coattails of yet another male relic whom she used and discarded once he was no longer useful to her. Although it does appear that Jake scored an invitation to the wedding, at least. So if that's the case, how does this bode for the American Gold Digging Association? You can tell Meghan is currently working on her own, not listening to advisors, because of how poorly planned the whole launch was. Forget the timing. Like I said, this woman has nothing to sell. The website is nothing but a landing page showing you the logo, which is her handwriting, and not much else. Clearly, to me, the likes of Jake Rosenberg aren't on speed dial anymore to come to the rescue. So I suppose only time will tell if this latest venture will be successful. But if her past endeavors are any indication, and judging again from the disastrous launch, I'd say the odds are close to nil. But I could be wrong. So after considering all of this, and considering all the opportunities that she's had since marrying Harry, I have a challenge for Meghan Markle. I don't know if she's aware of this channel, but she has made it very clear in her recent appearance at South by Southwest that she is very well aware of the YouTube community that calls her out on YouTube. In fact, she threatened to shut us down, effectively. So on the off chance she's listening, here's the challenge. How about, for once in your life, you actually try to accomplish something purely standing on your own 2 feet, based on your own merit, your own name. No husbands, no titles, no connections. Be the strong and independent woman who don't need no man or titles that you always love to tell us you are, and actually build something that you can put your name to proudly without having people call you an opportunistic grifter and gold digger who does nothing but use people to further herself. Just thought I'd put that out there, I'm not gonna hold my breath. And if you wanna live, I suggest you don't hold yours either, because we're probably going to suffocate. Yeah, that's it. Hope you found this informative. I thought it was very interesting. I've always wondered, why was the TIG relatively successful when this woman is incapable of even successfully marrying into the royal family? She squandered that. Just utterly hopeless. She's hopeless. All right, guys, I'll see you later.